Welcome to Philly Coco Presents Side Project Spotlight, Episode 18. This is the developer's journey to making cool stuff. We are your communications officer on the Starfleet voyage. I'm Kotaro.
I'm Steve.
And I'm Aaron.
And we are Philly Coco, a Philadelphia-based Cocoa Heads community focused on Apple development. That primarily, but not exclusively, means iOS, Mac, tvOS, and watchOS development. Philly's Coco's true desire is to take you higher on your own developer journey. Okay.
So if you're listening to this in like when it gets released, then you know our last episode we were talking about a sprint we were going to do. That we're going to discuss next time because we are recording this ahead of WWDC, so that it's out in time. This is going to be our big dub speculation episode.
Yes. Speculation of all the things. What are we speculating?
What are we speculating? Well,
all right, we can start with the generic stuff.
Well, what is WWDC?
Oh,
I think everybody listening to this knows what it is. But
Aaron, what is WWDC?
Worldwide Apple Development Conference. But yeah, I don't know. I've never been there, so I don't really know what it is.
Yes.
Only been to the virtual ones.
Yeah, me too. I've never been there in person, although this year they actually have some in-person aspect to DubDub, but it's their big developer conference. Everybody has one. Google just had one.
Yes. And the thing about it, like if we're talking about pre-pandemic period, it was almost like a nice place where Apple revealed a lot of their tech that they're going to really promote and release, mostly throughout the year. So usually it's software specific. So like you would see a preview of the next Mac OS, iOS, operating systems, watchOS, tvOS. At this point, it's become to a point where we have so many different SDKs that they have to sort of do a full, when they do their keynote, I mean, they really just have to commit to the software. It's very rare if they will say, okay, here's some hardware announcements. You wouldn't expect a hardware announcement. You shouldn't expect a hardware announcement, even though sometimes they do have them. But it's fairly rare these days. So it's a great opportunity for developers to get a nice preview and beta software of a lot of this stuff and to play around, to test, and get your apps ready for when they ultimately get released, which is usually September, October.
Yeah, and this year it's virtual again, just like it's been for the last 2 years, except they also added a special in-person session, I guess, just to watch the keynote. And it's unclear to me whether it's unclear what else you can do there in person. They're going to do...
they might have like lab events.
They might. It's. I'm not sure. They have an in-person Apple Park viewing party is what they're calling it officially. Sure. And they already sent out the lottery invites. So I guess you could sign up. You could enter a lottery. Mm-hmm. And then if you won, you had the opportunity to go there. Now, I didn't enter the lottery because I wasn't going to spend thousands of dollars, whatever, to go to California for a viewing party. And we're just going to do one on Zoom here.
So one of the things, I mean, again, pre-pandemic, I should say, when you did go, like a lot of times there are people who would go that didn't have a ticket, but they would go to like events around WWDC. So like AltConf was a really good place as an alternative one. It was right across the street from the Moscone, actually, last time I went. And they would have their own, relatively cheap, if not free event where it would be a lot of different types of talks around the Apple ecosystem. So it could be one could be like a talk about server-side Swift or UI design, diversity things, or app deployment techniques, CocoaPod setup, that kind of like a variety of topics that don't necessarily get covered by Apple proper.
Yeah, does all conference even happen anymore? I don't think so because they haven't done it in person. So I don't think it's done it since 2019.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it was just like those types. There was also another one called Layers that was much more of the design focused, I believe, that you paid like maybe about $200 to. I heard that was really good. And then there was just a bunch of parties that you would just go to. And
but I wonder, their website, AllConf, doesn't have anything about this year. I wonder if they're going to do anything. I mean, probably not because it's just done at the one day. thing.
Yeah.
But this is the first time doing anything in person in 2 years. So that's what the big deal is. And there's a lot of value to being there in person on during those normal years. I think that the problem with it is, of course, it's just always been very expensive to go. And it's gotten more expensive over time because more people are in the developer community. And so when the pandemic all started and they went 100% virtual, it ended up being, in a lot of ways, better for more people, even if it's not the best possible experience you could have. And for someone like me, who really could never justify the expense, and I couldn't get work to pay for me to go to California for a week, so to me, it was better because they pre-recorded the videos, which I let them be produced better, and they were shorter and seemed more focused. And I think a lot of developers have been saying this for a couple of years, that they think the videos are way better now in a lot of ways than they used to be when they were just someone up on stage. So I like the direction they've gone. I hope they continue with the virtual as the primary delivery medium for the videos, and then they have more lab time. Now it's virtual lab time, and maybe they'll have in-person lab time for the people there. I don't know, but the lab time stuff is apparently really useful, and there's a lot more spots than I think there ever was before with the virtual conference. So that's pretty neat.
Right. I guess one of the things that I remember going to the conference, and I think they had like an after party thing. And I was talking with a group of developers, and I was expounding about how awesome. I'm really gonna hate myself for this, but I forgot the name of this audio software that you can really easily splice and dice. It was a Mac software that you can easily splice and dice audios and just copy and paste. It was just such a.
Is it Audio Hijack?
No, it was an indie developer. I think his name was Luis. Again, I'm gonna kick myself afterwards, but basically it was just this really nice, clean app, and I was just giving it just shooting off the moon at how awesome it is. The guy who developed it was actually right in that crowd, just like, nice. That's my software. And I was like, oh goodness, you're the man. It's just like one of those moments of just like, you don't realize like the degree of separation is so small in that community that at that time it was just like you could talk to the key developer of SpriteKit and be like,
I had that experience with Coca-Love before I was like official member of Philly Coca, and that's how I was introduced to the group. And I remember that was like my experience there, because we had some big names at the time in iOS world were there, and like that was cool. It was cool because I got to I remember that's where I met Mark Arment for like the one and only time, and I love his podcast player Overcast. I still use it, and so I got to say hello and talk to him a little bit about how it works. And he was I think he's showing off like a build at the time, and it was like that kind of stuff is fun. You don't get that in a virtual conference. You don't get that. The real value is meeting other developers and community, not just like the ones who are quote unquote famous, but just like being able to meet people and talk to them.
Well, I just remember from that one, Austin Serafin, who is blind by birth, but is it's hard to say. He's a accessibility consultant, and he was doing a talk about his relationship with the iPhone. Really good talk, fantastic talk, and how he uses it. And I think for a lot of people in that conference, including Marco, that was like an eye-opening experience of like, like this is not the way we normally use it, and I have to reassess how I develop for that app. So they actually had a little bit of a conversation.
Wow, I didn't know that conversation happened. But that's great. His talks were definitely eye-opening for me too. And I remember he was in Philly Coca talks before Coca Love. Yeah, and so the alt conferences that would go on around WWDC, or even like Coca-Cola was not around WWDC, right? But it was but these alternative conferences are very useful too. But the conference space is really, not as big as it used to be, especially with the pandemic the last several years. So it's just it still exists. There's still some, but a lot of the ones don't exist anymore.
Yeah, they're beginning to like open up slowly. So it's like a hybrid approach now.
Yeah.
So like I know like GDC, which is the Game Developer Conference, did allow for in person, but they also has sort of like a virtual track of sorts. So like you can do it one or the other. I don't know from a logistical standpoint how easy that is to accomplish.
Yeah.
Which it can't possibly be. Like even with Philly Coco, if we were to have in-person meetings, we would still have to probably figure out a way to at least have some opportunity for people to join virtually. But that's a subject for another day.
Yeah. So that's what WWDC is. It's the official conference for Apple. It's going to be virtual again this year, for all intents and purposes, except for the few people who won the lottery. And I didn't. Did you even enter either of you?
No desire.
No, I did not.
Okay. Well,
I mean, like you said, like the cost of going there is just exorbitantly too high at the moment.
Well, we'll have to see what Curtis thinks of it. He's going.
Yes. Shout out to you, Curtis.
Shout out to
Slopes.com.
That's right. He lives much closer there now than we do, so I think he can drive there.
He could drive it.
Or take a short plane.
Yeah.
Plane ride.
Yeah.
I think it's just a direct flight.
So,
I mean, you could drive for a long time, but
you might be
not as long as us.
Back to speculating.
Back to speculating. So the main purpose of this episode was to speculate, as we always do. We do a bingo, so maybe some of these ideas will find their way onto the bingo card for the Philly Coca watch party. But what are the big things you guys have heard about WWDC? I think for me, like the biggest rumor that I guess I would hope to see, that a lot of people hope to see, that it's probably not going to happen, would be a Mac Pro announcement there. Because hardware is not really a thing. WWDC usually has so much stuff that they don't have time for hardware, and I think there's a possibility, but I'm still not convinced there's going to be.
I mean,
a Mac Pro announcement.
I would think maybe not so much the Mac Pro, although that's a possibility. But I could see an M2 chip reveal, right, where they would kind of discuss the benefits of the M2 chip, what makes it great, and maybe the Mac Pro or something is is introduced that way. So if it's to promote the M2 chip, I can see that.
Yeah, an M2 Mac Pro. Yeah, maybe.
Like some kind of thing for the architecture of how you would take advantage of it, because I think that's already a problem with like M1 and like the Max and Ultra to like truly take advantage of it. You need
especially
to,
the Ultra,
massively parallelize your applications. So.
Yeah, and there's some specifics with the Ultra to get it to really work, to take its full advantage that I don't really think most software has done. So like I know that some of the reviews I was reading, that the Ultra was not providing the amount of performance increase you'd expect. Right. And some of that was because software optimizations apparently need to be done. And if you're going to do a Pro, Mac Pro, you're going to want probably more than an Ultra, because I mean that's available now in a studio. So you can't cook two of them together, though, as far as we know. There's no interconnect for that. So you'd have to do something else. And I feel like, but an M2 you could potentially have designed it so it did have the ability to do a quad. And I think that's what they're going to do, is some kind of quad setup.
Yeah, I mean the other thing to keep in mind, like I think Final Cut Pro was not optimized when the M1 Ultra was revealed for like at least a week or so, or 2 weeks. A period of time where like people were like, why I can't take advantage of it because the Final Cut Pro was not, I mean, I can, but like, why is Final Cut of all things not optimized for it from day one?
Yeah. I gotta say, Final Cut is amazing.
Have some compassion for these people.
Yeah, I know. they have to work.
Yeah.
What? I have to wait a week? So the actually Final Cut, I have experience with it on a base M1, like a 13-inch M1. Mm-hmm. Amazing. I mean, amazing performance compared to literally anything else. I've used Final Cut I've used not Final Cut, I used the what's the consumer one? The lower end version. iMovie. So I used iMovie on a MacBook Air, like one of the best Intel one. The last Intel one they had. I think that's one I used. I used it on there. It was terrible. Right, that was iMovie, and I used iMovie on this M1. It's just night and day. And then I upgraded the Final Cut on the M1, and it's like you can just do things you could literally not do on a computer that's cheap before. So it's amazing. So I'm thinking that the M2 model, they have to add probably just more processors, because I don't think the M2 chip itself is going to be a gigantic leap from like there was from Intel to M1. I think I think the rumors are it's more of an evolutionary thing.
I thought they were shrinking the nanometer size. So
yeah, it'll be better, and hopefully single core. I want single core performance. That would make me want to buy another machine. Like right now, it's really expensive to get into an M1 Pro or M1 Max laptop, and I want to, because of the screen and everything and all the other stuff, but it's really expensive just for performance. It's not necessarily worth it for my use cases, and also it's like 3 months back order. So,
really,
so it's awful. It's awful. There's no telling when you get stuff. But an M2, if it has a faster single core, that helps with any computing task that I do. And so that would be something to really consider, because I've had this thing since December, I think, of 2020. So after 2 or 3 years, I might want to upgrade.
I mean, the other possible hardware-specific things is I've heard rumors about updated iPads, but I've also heard...
Yeah.
And then there's the very, very not going to happen rumor of AR glasses, or even like a dev kit for AR glasses or VR, whichever version they decide.
The dev kit is the most likely thing, obviously, for WWDC. If they actually want to release in the fall, like a real thing, they would have to have some kind of dev kit version.
And that would be most useful for us, because we want to do AR stuff. It's just that without a real, it's hard to find we've talked about this before. It's hard to find a niche that is worth the effort for your phone. Even something that we would use, even taking the definition of an app that we would use. It's hard to even come up with ideas for an AR app that I would use a lot.
It makes much more sense from a glasses point of view, right?
Yeah.
Like I think AR makes more sense when you don't have to hold this phone in your hand and like point to things, and that sort of awkwardness of having that experience through that. I think they're laying the groundwork very well. So every year, they just keep pumping out new stuff in the AR space and ARKit specifically, which I really think that's a telltale sign. Like they're investing a lot in this particular in AR, so that when the time comes when they do that reveal, like you have all this with Reality Composer, object detection, all this sort of SwiftUI to some degree, in that even though it's still not great for integrating with AR Kit just yet, because you still have to use like a view representable. But I think that will come with this next version.
Yeah, I think that how are they going to package this though? Because that they have to do it. The dev kit for M1, I mean, that was a chip change, so they just gave people a Mac Mini, but there's not really existing hardware, right? That they could use for a dev kit. They'd have to provide some kind of glasses, right? It doesn't have to be anything like the actual product that would be released, though, in terms of industrial design. But I guess they would have to make something, right? If they're going to provide a dev kit, it would be in the form of some glasses, or is there some other way we could think of that you would do a dev kit?
Well, remember that ski goggle look or design that we saw in one of the rumors?
That's what everybody's using as a design sketch, yeah.
So that strikes me as the I know that they said, oh, that's the production version, but that just to me it just
like it
doesn't seem like that's a good looking thing.
I don't know.
I mean, I get it's a cute concept, but it's not something that's practical.
It looks more like a VR headset than an AR headset, unless they're just going from the mixed thing. But then AR through cameras is really tricky and can make you. I mean, VR in general can make you feel nauseous, right? But AR through cameras is apparently it's not even worse, because then you have the extra lag.
Delay. Yeah, the lag.
But maybe they can do it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, if anyone could do it, Apple will do it, because they're not going to give a dev kit for something that would make people barf. I don't think that would be their plan.
One interesting rumor that came up recently was the game controller idea, where you would attach kind of like a Joy-Con, similar kind of concept, where you would have a Joy-Con-ish type of connection to your phone. And then that way, that would create a sort of like a game controller experience for your iPhone and maybe even your iPad. You can do this. You would attach these Joy-Cons again to, maybe it'd be like some kind of magnet or MagSafe kind of, not MagSafe. What was that one? The iPad keyboard connector. I forgot the name of it.
It's like the smart connector or something.
Smart
like
connector,
that.
right? Some kind of like use the smart connector to do the same thing for the controllers or something.
So you think they're going to have a controller contraption you put your phone into? That was the rumor.
That's a wish list thing. I don't know if they're really going to do that.
Yeah, I mean the key motivation was in that sense of like saying we're really getting into the gaming space. We're going to make a game console basically, or like we're going to make an experience as if you're we're competing in the game console space now is the implication there. Apple Arcade is a step in that direction. But Apple is very funny in this business where in many ways they became a game company without realizing they became a game company because they're one of the biggest, mobile is one of the biggest gaming spaces now in the consoles like take up it takes up a significant portion of the entire gaming space, but it's not as big at all to mobile. So on some level, like Apple has maybe at some point potentially has acknowledged that in the App Store it's like the second tab now. Games are the second tab. Whether or not there's like, you know what, we need to, they also have game controller where they actually have standardized the UI for the game control, like the virtual game controller. So now if you decide to create a game on the iPhone, it's not that hard. You don't have to do your own custom like virtual gamepad. You just use theirs.
How long has that been a thing?
About a year.
Oh, cool. So
I'm pretty sure it's about a year.
These are all hardware, though, which are the least likely things to show up at WWDC. Software.
How much time on that discussion?
Yeah. So let's move on to the things that are much more likely. I think it is likely that an iOS version 16 will be announced.
Yes.
And so I don't know. What do you think? And for iOS 16, like, do you have like a top thing you want them to change? I think every year for me, better notifications is always a thing. But everybody wants a new UI. Do you think this will be the year they're going to really change the UI? Because I don't think so. I don't think they're going to make big UI changes, like material design level changes where or iOS 7 days where they said, oh, look at this whole new design language. I don't think that's likely.
I think it would probably be more evolutionary than revolutionary, for lack of a better word. I think when we went flat design in iOS 7, it was such a dramatic change. But I think a lot of people who didn't program understood why those changes were, right? Yeah. Aside from like, oh, Johnny Ive took over and decided everything should be a little more modern or whatever. I mean, a lot of it was to save in terms of like not having to put textures everywhere, create images for textures and then create these sort of like, tooling around that kind of design and sort of get away from just this very skeuomorphic metaphors that we were using at the time. But now I can kind of see us getting into a space where animation's going to be a key draw. Right. And transitions are going to be much more, for lack of a better word, irrational.
Yeah, because I remember iOS 7 days, and after that they added features to do transitions. They did focus a lot on animation, and they had there's a cool physics engine you could use, and I used some of that, but it was not easy to use, especially certain things like transitions. They've done multiple, I think, iterations on that, but with SwiftUI, because it is so much more straightforward to do, animations and stuff. I agree with you. I think that pushing SwiftUI plus animations as a thing for the UI design might change things. So I wouldn't be surprised if iOS 16 just has a lot more funky animated stuff going on.
Yeah, I mean that, and
or the talks will just focus on animation and transitions.
Yeah, I mean the the idea in my mind is like you're going to get stuff that's less standardized, for lack of a better word, of like just the push pull and the modal is kind of going up. Those are still be there, but then like everything that happens within the view will be a lot more fluid. And a lot more...
kind of the opposite approach that Google seemed to be pushing with more and more of their material design and trying to get everybody to use this. I mean, the way they're doing it, it seems, and I'm not real, super familiar with this. So don't like pillar me for not knowing about material design, but like the last I saw some of the stuff from Google I/O, and they were pushing like this material design that lets the backgrounds and stuff bleed through in different ways, and there's a lot of color theory in there. So it's like if everybody used that, their apps would not look the same, but they would have a very similar feel. But maybe on Apple's side, they're going to maybe push away from that and be like, just go more unique, like the old days, but without skeuomorphism.
So I think that that's an interesting proposition, right? Like I'm for it on some level, but I know how companies work in that sense of like, we're not going to give away all the research and development we've done with our color palettes. We have brand obligations. We have a lot of investment in our color palette. So I don't think that, particularly in the first year, I don't think the people on the Android side, at least from the enterprise application or big company applications, are going to embrace that. If you're an indie developer or a small company, sure, I think this is reasonable. This is something reasonable to try out. It's just one of those things where the moment you decide to give up your color palette, and you sort of give it to Google, you have to sort of trust that they will select, like you have no control of like what color palettes, say, the user decides to put in their background, right? And
right.
For the most part, probably should be fine, probably will be fine, and 95% of the time it'll be fine until you find that one edge case.
Well, that's why they have this system on the Google side that I was saying that can take like the colors, it can create a color palette based on that stuff that looks good. And so I'm looking through like the human interface guidelines here, and so I wonder if this might be the year we get better theming support. I mean, because you look through the material, the human interface guidelines, and you have stuff about animation and branding and color and materials, but they're all separate. So it's like they have the ultra thin material and the thin material, and they have different colors, and they talk about how to use colors and stuff. But there isn't like one place, right, that you just go to and it's like define my theme for the app, right? It's like you got to kind of build it yourself based upon these pieces. Like I'm going to use the system colors, or I'm going to use the dynamic. I'm going to use the dynamic colors for things like label, secondary label, and stuff like that. I'm gonna define my color palette and stuff. But then it's not like there's an API I can just go to, right? And it just says here's my theme. Not exactly, right? I
mean, if we're talking like global themes, sure. But
there's like mechanisms to try to do things at a global level,
but not like So like for example, in iOS you can identify accent color.
Yeah, the accent color.
You can define. I mean, they do have materials of their own in terms of like thin materials, that kind of thing.
Yeah. But I wonder
so that does the blurring in the right way in that sort of sense.
Yeah.
The challenge for the developer or the product owner, I guess, for the app is like, where do you draw that line, right? Where do you say, okay, we're going to take advantage of some of the theming abilities within Apple or within Android, especially if you're doing cross-platform. That's where the challenge really comes to play, because you're kind of saying like where does the company begin and the platform ends, or
so
vice versa.
And they have these features here in it, and SwiftUI makes decisions for you. So maybe that's just going to keep going that way, where you tweak things there. But I don't know. When I built the university app, right, early on we had a designer helping. I used DB5, I think it was the little library that I basically created I think it was like a P list with all these settings in it. And I was able to, the designer was able to just change colors and fonts and stuff like that. And then that would be reflected everywhere they were used in the app. and like some kind of mechanism to make it easier for designers to give you to like really create a theme and then and modify and change it, because I think that it was really helpful when I was able to do that in the app, to see it, like make the change and then see it, and the designer could just change things. And I know other people have talked about this over the years.
So what you're asking for is a CSS framework.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm just wondering if we have SwiftUI. Maybe it's just part of SwiftUI is like a better way of defining the things that you always have to theme. Like you have the accent color, that's one thing.
Sure.
And you have like text and stuff like that, but it's not all necessarily collected in one place to make it easy to maybe to modify. Or specifically, I'm thinking like a designer, so they don't have to touch code or anything. And just like if I give them this file, or they just modify this thing in Xcode, they can just do it. I mean, I know we have a lot of that in there. I just feel like, or maybe I just want to talk where they just talk about how to do all this stuff with the tools and maybe in Xcode. Because I know you can Xcode nowadays, you can just drag in your colors and you drag in your images and you can refer to them by names and stuff like that. I know it's all in there.
Actually be kind of an interesting point of like saying like in the asset folder have some kind of theming, like a theme set or something like that, and then in that theme set you can have certain categories that can define like a color spec, like a color of like dark mode, light mode, like a color set in that theme of like for the nav bar, for the toolbar, for the whatever, right?
Yeah, it's I mean, I think Apple would need to go maybe more towards a material design type of philosophy, where I think material design really is a complete system, right? And it like they understand the relationship between all the aspects of it. And I don't get that impression from Apple. Like they have recommendations on color and animation, all stuff, but they don't have like, this is the Apple way that you should do things. They don't have this thing that you can't just go to interface guidelines and get the equivalent of a page about material design, like Apple's material design or something. So I don't know if they're going to go that way, but that's something I thought about. If they're going to do any kind of design changes or tweaks, that's something I would like. Is just better theming type support, because it would go along with the idea of SwiftUI helping you be more productive, maybe even more productive as like a non-designer, just to get better looking stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of hard in a way because a lot of the stuff is, I feel like it's in transition at the moment, where I don't know if we spend a lot of time making an app the center point of a user's experience without really understanding nowadays what a user's flow is, and how much time they actually want to spend in our app. We're so concerned about that kind of engagement. It's almost like we treat every app as if it's like a social media app.
Yeah, yeah, you don't want to do that. But also, I think users want to customize their experiences on their phones, and I think Google is pushing towards that. And I wonder if Apple is as much. I mean, somewhat, like widgets are part of that, and maybe just I want general improvements in all those places. The way to personalize it, you could do like a custom icon, provide custom icons. You can provide widgets with different features, but it just doesn't seem to me like, it doesn't feel like a coherent view of the whole personalization option. I think if Apple pivoted and said or pushed personalizing the apps, and you used SwiftUI to help you get there, because because then it's more of a declarative framework for doing the UI. I think that you could meld the two together, and then you can end up with something where users could make your apps and your widgets and your pieces of UI kind of feel more coherent and yet also personalized. I don't know what that would mean, but that's something that I would like to see more of that personalization aspect of it, because phones are not. I mean, until you get maybe folding phones that people from Apple or something, it's like they're just rectangles, and they still have just mostly app icons and now widgets, and it's not as. It's like, what else can you do to get people to use your stuff? What else can you do to make phones more appealing to people? Well, make them more personalizable. People love to personalize stuff.
I get it from a user's point of view, although I come from a point of view of like, I tend to keep things pretty vanilla, for lack of a better word. I mean, I do use widgets, but I don't tend to do too much outside of like trying to like go beyond what the recommended approach for handling these apps are, just so I can sort of stay close to to a traditional user experience as much as I can.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If it's vanilla, but then the user can maybe adjust it more.
I always use my mom as sort of the gauge of that experience because she's just coming. She came in very cold turkey, very much when like all this, this iOS ecosystem had matured dramatically, and then I sort of look at her as like my litmus test of, or even my dad of like what's their pain points, what are the things that they don't get, what are like what should like two-factor authentication is like the worst nightmare in my mind, but it's the only solution we have at the moment, right? Like, why do we have that? Like, why did we pick that as our solution, right? Like stuff like that of like figuring out like people who don't have the technical prowess to understand why these things are built in the first place, right? Like, and when we build our apps, understanding and respecting that experience, so then somehow figure out how we can come to them versus like us having to sort of demand them to come to us from a skill level.
People have been talking about maybe notifications get updated, and that would be great because I find the whole thing confusing. But there's no details about that. But you just mentioned something I think would be really cool. The password management and moving beyond passwords, I mean, is a thing that Apple's big on now. I think they're part of like the FIDO. Is that what it is? The FIDO group, whatever that's working on this password system. They demoed it last WWDC. This system that uses like keys and your iCloud keychain and stuff, so you don't have to have a password to access things. But what's really missing right now for like your mom or for like quote unquote normal people or non-developers is some. I think the password management like that's built in on Macs is terrible. I mean, the UI, like I don't know why they keep hiding it in settings, and it's, you know what I mean? It's just I can't recommend anybody use keychain if you have a lot of stuff that you actually want to track, like manage specifically. It's just such an awkward interface. And I wonder if they're going to bring out like a 1Password competitor, like an actual app to use.
I think they should do something where a lot of the password management is done for them. It's done for the user. So like if I'm rotating, if I have a really crappy password, like I've looked through my what Apple reports and says, hey, these passwords have been used repeatedly or they've been found on a data leak.
Yeah.
Can you just, I don't want to have to go through all these websites and
so
fix that. Can
they
you do that for me?
I mean, yeah. I mean, they will alert you now. They have that integration, but I don't know.
Great.
I don't know if it's worth doing an actual app per se, because Apple wants to move beyond passwords.
Sure.
So why put in the effort to make a whole app and because that's not what they want to train users to do, maybe.
Well, I was thinking much more of like a migration tool.
Yeah, migration.
Well,
I mean, they
have
have
a solution for this issue.
They have migration from other password managers into Keychain and out. I mean, they see, the thing is, they built a lot of the stuff in there. It's just hidden in settings. Mm-hmm. It's like in this weird awkward place, instead of just making it obvious by having an app that's right there on your dock. And in like on the Mac, I mean, on your phone, iOS, it's like you have to go into the settings app to look at it. Like that's what I mean. That's like, where is that? And on iPad, I think it's the same thing. It's like you need like an app or something, easier way to get to it. But because it is really well integrated and it works well. But I just wonder, the password stuff, I don't think it's necessarily an app, but I think they're going to see more of the password stuff. There's going to be at least one session about their passwordless future, because they did one last year, and so they've had a whole year to work on it. Mm-hmm. And because I really think the future is not passwords. It's going to be like this. And their Apple's idea is that you basically trust your iCloud system, their whole system of trust they built up. So you're just going to use, I guess your Apple account, but it's not going to be the same thing as creating a password. It's done with these key exchange stuff. So it's very private, it's very secure, and you don't need to remember passwords for anything. So it's, I don't know, did you see that talk? Did you watch it from last year?
Now it's on my
yeah, you should watch it. It's a short one. It's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. And there's actually beta support in Mac OS. But I didn't try it, but it's the demo they use was pretty cool. So that's one thing I'm thinking of is that.
Yeah, the other thing, like, if there was ever a year for, like, SwiftUI, like, at this point, I feel like SwiftUI is on track to be now much more of if you're coming into Apple development, that should be the framework you use. And to start with. With SwiftUI 4. You still need to understand UIKit, and that's going to still be a thing for years to come.
Yeah.
But if you're brand new and you're fresh, and especially if you're coming from like React Native or a Flutter environment or like one of those kind of frameworks, like this is just it's an easy transition in that sense of like, oh, okay, well, I get this paradigm, I get this UI flow, and it's easy for a junior developer to just jump in, get productive very quickly. And so there are a lot of missing things about SwiftUI 3 in relations to UI view representable stuff. So like there's no ARKit view yet that is native within SwiftUI. There's a lot of stuff that is native to UIKit. There's no native support for PencilKit, which is another thing that I would love to have natively supported, because for me, I use PencilKit for my animation app, but they haven't done too much with it since when it was first released. So I would, that's one of the things where it's like, well, I can deal with that, assuming that they provide some native support in SwiftUI. That'll be awesome to just sort of integrate into my workflow, as opposed to like, UI, like making this sort of bloated UI view representable.
I want NavigationLink improvement.
NavigationLink improvements, yeah. There, I don't know, Aaron, do you have any like SwiftUI improvements you would like to see, or support you would like to see?
Trying to think. Well, we already mentioned native ARView. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I guess just more of those different things. There's what were some of the other things that were still there was like Siri intent view controller is another thing for like Siri intent UI extension. You still have to use a view controller for that. Some other types of things like that where you have this like native view thing, and you can customize it a lot, but it's like you're still stuck with this thing, and it's a view controller, and you can't do anything other than like put stuff.
Do a lot of things. It just,
I mean,
you
can't do
remember how to use a storyboard.
Right. What was the thing that I had to use a storyboard for?
I think it was like when you do a Siri intent, you actually
it was the Siri intent
lock the
UI.
System, the
when
UI.
If you want to customize the UI
which reminds me,
the Siri intent.
I need to fix that.
It's like it's like notifications, so we had to go through like a view controller, but they at least have the ability to do the SwiftUI as a view. It's just that you have to like do some of the routing through the controller.
And my point of view about it is like any of the things related to keyboard or text fields, or I think there's always been stuff related to form entries that was always a little bit tricky. So if those stories, and as you were saying, NavigationLink, the navigation issue of like not having support for like pop to root or those kinds of scenarios of like nested navigation views. Like that's been a point of frustration for a lot of our colleagues. If that story is figured out in this version of SwiftUI, I can pretty much expect like the sea of developers coming on board this year for SwiftUI.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's cool. And is there anything else you're thinking about? I think the other big thing is the constant hope for a replacement to core data, right?
Shout out to you, Sean. We know who you are. You've been wanting that for so long. Yep. We know you've been desperately dreaming for the next version, a Swiftified core data.
Yeah, what would that mean do you think to you? Would it be like something that already exists in the market, or like what would you like to see? You're much more familiar with core data than I am, like in data use of modern frameworks.
See, the problem is I'm much more comfortable in the SQL sort of frame of mind. I've sort of done a lot of SQL development in the past, and so I'm comfortable in that space versus like maybe
me too.
Modern database developers much more into databases that are mutable in the data structure and flat in terms of the way you would lay out the data. Maybe coming from like a MongoDB or a NoSQL style approach. So you would architect your database a little bit differently than you would say a SQL database, which is a little more stringent and like firm in terms of like how you architect and reference each particular entity, and then also like how you support that and maintain that going forward.
So you think a NoSQL style would be an obvious replacement?
That's challenging, yes, potentially.
I mean,
but
we
then
have
like
CloudKit, which sort of.
Yeah, behind the scenes, I understand it to be like a NoSQL database,
but it's not how you integrate. You still kind of use core data on the client.
Right.
It's an awkward thing. So I could see like a NoSQL style DB, but like I don't know. Does have you used something? Have you used like was it Realm? Have you used that before? As I haven't. I don't. No. I know a lot of people like that. I haven't used it, so I don't know what those people yelling at us now. Like, yes, Realm. I don't know what's so different about it, but I could see a NoSQL style thing maybe. But if they just kept with a SQL database or SQLite in as the storage, what would you like to see changed in some kind of? Or is it just a core data just needs better APIs? Is it still going into an like Objective-C land for a lot of it?
Yes.
Implementation wise, so it's like it needs native Swift.
Right, but I mean, SwiftUI does a really good job of obfuscating a lot of that, where there was a lot of setup and in UI kit that you had to do. So I think they've been doing a better job of like reducing the amount of setup work that you have to do in the recent updates to iOS. So I hope that continues to go forward. It's just making it just really neat. And sort of like reduces the amount of setup friction that tends, like particularly when we're doing like the difference between like a shared and public database versus your private database, and coming up with a way to better integrate that into the entire story of like CloudKit core data integration. Like if that's still going to be a thing, then I would at least like to make it easier to set that up so that when I do share a file if I do set up a way to share a file with you, like there's better APIs to support that. So that would probably be my wish for that. The other, and then like I think a little better support for CloudKit in terms of like I don't want to have to go in and do certain manual things in CloudKit that I still have to do for obvious things like querying. I have to set up my indexes manually, that kind of stuff.
So you want better integration in what, Xcode, or in the SwiftUI,
or Xcode? Probably probably both, but I guess we could start with Xcode in that sense. I think more so than the CloudKit console than anything else. I want that to be a little more fleshed out. And I think the layout, they've improved the layout dramatically, but it still feels a little awkward in certain areas. So I would like them to like really flesh that out to be a little more. And there's certain support that you expect from like Firebase and something like that, but you don't get in like CloudKit, and it's hard to test for that. So there's that. I don't know. Everything else, I think, I don't know. I'm sort of willing to just let, whatever Apple surprises and delights us with. I'm more than happy to sort of just like, show us something cool.
So Aaron, do you have anything on your anything else on your wish list here you want to speculate about?
Aaron, anything? Well, AR for sure. I would like to see that story expanded, just so we know that that's still where the puck is going.
Yeah, maybe at least a commitment of like it's coming at a specific time instead of just like hinting at it with all these, ARKit framework stuff, but that them to actually confirm that they're like they announced the transition to Apple Silicon or something, and so something more definitive of it's coming next year or something, even if it doesn't come this year.
I also would like to better support for Reality Composer integration, tooling, I should say. The composer's fine, but it's very basic. So like if I wanted to have a 3D object, but I wanted I wanted to act as a parent to a smaller object, right? So let's say I have a chair with a 3D chair with like a teddy bear on top, right? And then I just want to move the chair around. Like I have to, there's no way to like parent that that teddy bear to the chair, or you like lock that teddy bear to the chair. You'd have to do that programmatically. So you would have to like create that relationship in code versus like doing it in Reality Composer. So like I would like basically, expand on Reality Composer to make it much more useful as a tool to set up my 3D objects in the 3D space, and then add better triggers for a lot of different scenarios that are much more expansive and not so like I feel like I'm like it at the moment. It feels very much like GarageBand version of like what I really want.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I like that. Yeah. I mean, we could talk forever about these things.
Sure.
We didn't even touch on like services are probably going to be a thing, but I'm not sure from a developer perspective what that might bring, if anything, this year. I know that there's a push for more access to like NFC, Apple Pay type options, but I don't think that's going to be a thing this year, because even if they do that, that would take time. So I don't expect to see anything like that. WatchOS, I don't think they're going to announce a new watch. They might have HealthKit improvements, but I don't think they're gonna. If they don't announce the hardware, then they're not going to be able to announce new sensors or anything.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that is always a good opportunity for any developer to look at is to look at the Swift Evolution GitHub page and kind of see like what has been approved for which version of iOS, so you kind of know, you kind of get a sense of what to expect with iOS Swift 5.7 or 5.6, and just sort of get yourself ready to have access to that. And some of the things like concurrency, the concurrency story with Swift, stuff like regex support, which is a really interesting one. There's some things where you can look forward to even before WWDC that will give you a preview of what to expect.
Yeah, we saw a little demo of the regex support at the meeting, the Philly Cooking meeting. That was really cool because it reminded me of Perl back in the day, where you could where regular expressions were just native types. Like you could just write them in your code. They were there. You didn't have to wrap it in some kind of method call or something. And that was the part of the support that I thought was most interesting. Because when I did do a lot of Perl, and it was in an environment where I was actually most useful on like a server side. That's what it made me think. I wonder if this is going to be better for server side. But when you're in that environment, you have to do a lot of regular expression stuff. It was really nice in Perl just to be able to do that, just be able to do it and not have all the ceremony around creating it. So that support looks interesting. I don't have it in front of me. I don't think, is it approved, or is it just still in like a
I don't want to say anything, particularly once this gets released. It probably might have been, but who knows?
So I mean that's something. And did you see improvements or changes to concurrency in there?
I haven't reviewed it in a while, so it's just one of the things where I'm sure there's something for support for like guard statements or that kind of, or conditionals, where it's a little more convenient. There's some convenience support for like making it a little easier to implement and read, which is nice. So yeah, like little things and big things. Looking at that Swift Evolution page is a really good indicator of what you can expect to see at WWDC. Glimpse. Anything framework related, like new UI, Reality Composer version, whatever, 3 or 4, and hopefully like updates to the PencilKit API. That's also an indicator of like whether or not you can expect to build an app with support, with like knowing that there's going to be continued support for that framework, or if they're just going to like let it stay as it is, and then you kind of have to adjust accordingly.
I hope they continue to improve PencilKit. I just got my very first iPad with a PencilKit. Got an iPad Mini.
Sure.
And it's cool. And now I want to. Now I have like something I can really use the PencilKit framework on. So I kind of want them to improve it.
Yeah, agree.
Because it is a pain in the butt to use right now in SwiftUI. A little bit.
I am going to pivot a little bit here. Our not a sponsor today is Swift by Sundell. You can go to swiftbysundell.com. He doesn't know that we're promoting his blog, podcast, and other things, but I just like his stuff. John Sundell has a wonderful website, and a lot of his work is very similar to things I learned with Mohammed. He talks a lot about Swift, SwiftUI, and he has deep technical talks around concurrency, which I've really been enjoying. So I recommend that site. And he just recently took off all his ads, and he said no more ads on my website. It's just going to be pure vanilla Swift by Sundell.
So that's cool. I'm just going on the website. I haven't been on in a while. I remember, didn't he do like a podcast at DubDub in previous years, or with developers during that week? Like they came out. He's done, and his podcast is also really good. But yeah, I got to go back to. I got to make sure I have his RSS of this and subscribe, because he's great stuff in here.
Just want to give a shout out to John Sundell. I listen to your stuff. I read your stuff. I love your stuff. Thank you for all the work you've been doing.
Yeah, and happy 5-year-old birthday of Swift by Sundell. Apparently that was May 5th is exactly 5 years.
Cool. So, with that being said, this will conclude our WWDC Speculation podcast. You can learn more about Philly Cocoa at phillycocoa.org. There you'll find links to our Slack, meetup schedule, and contact info. If you're feeling generous, please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcast and share us with all your developer friends. And one more thing. Developers are like an organism that turns coffee into code. Till next time, good luck with your own developer journey. We will cheer for you always.
They're not going to give a dev kit for something that would make people barf.